Hey, folks, welcome back. We got Luke McCoy from Family Council, familycouncil.org. Luke, Merry Christmas, sir. How are you?
Merry Christmas Eve, Paul. Good to talk to you. Thanks
Yeah.
for letting me be on this morning. And Merry Christmas to all your listeners, and hope everyone has a safe, joyous holiday.
Absolutely. Man, it's great to talk to you. You got big plans for Christmas? What you guys traveling? What are you doing?
We got big plans, Paul. We're going to do nothing. We're going to stay in town and enjoy our time.
That's awesome. That's
So,
great. That's great.
I'm, I got 3 kids, and so for us to go anywhere, as a lot of folks can imagine, it's just sometimes it can be a hassle. But my parents are in town. My wife's parents are in town.
There you go.
Any living grandparents are in town. So we're spoiled when it comes to Thanksgiving and Christmas. We do one set of family in the afternoon and the other family in the evening, and both families appreciate the timing. And in years past, when we had to split up Thanksgiving lunch and Christmas Day, it was very hectic. And so I'm thankful for the ease of holidays these days for at least my immediate family.
No, I agree, and I've got a similar situation here where I am, and it's certainly it's nice. But I do talk to other folks, and when the traveling is rough. And then I talk to some people that's like, yeah, we got kids, we're staying home, and then they just put up like a flag, like an open invitation. If you want to come see us, you can come see us. Like all family are welcome. Come on, come see us. If not, no hard feelings. Luke, what can you tell us? What's on your mind today? I got this, we were talking about what you're going to talk about, I think a few weeks ago. And I think it just had to do with the value of human life and what that means. And there's a lot of things that people might necessarily know in the pro-life, pro-choice, or pro-death argument.
Correct. So this was and I'll spill the beans here in just a second, but this was a hot topic back during George W. Bush's term, also in the 90s, and Clinton, and it became even more a hot potato in Obama's presidency, but we really haven't heard much about it. And I was reminded by our friends at the Colston Center for a Biblical Worldview, won't go into who those folks are necessarily, but they reminded us that embryonic stem cell research is going on as we speak. Of course, we knew that, but not only is it going on, but federal funding, taxpayer money, is being used to fund embryonic stem cell research to this day. In fact, to the tune of about $200 million a year. And as some of your listeners will know, it has produced over 20 some odd, maybe 30 years, 0 results. All time, U.S. taxpayers have spent about, I estimate, somewhere north of $2 billion. And as far as we know, there's no medical breakthrough. There's no successful treatment that's tackling some debilitating, chronic, terminal, bad disease. $2 billion over the last 20 to 30 years has been spent on embryonic stem cell research. And even under the Trump administration, it still goes on today. And so I actually reached out to a former White House official. You may guess who that is, and I didn't hear back, unfortunately. But nonetheless, I'm going to look into what is the Trump administration doing. In fact, I reached out to some other Washington, D.C. folks that, with Alliance Defending Freedom and Americans United for Life, they're sort of groups that we work with closely on pro-life and religious liberty legislation and issues. And I'm trying to figure out what is the Trump administration doing, because as far as I can tell, when it comes to embryonic stem cell research specifically, the Trump administration isn't doing anything, from what I can tell.
Well, you don't even hear about this anymore. No. I mean, let me just, I don't really know much about it. I know the phrase stem cell research, and I know there are different kinds, right? There's the embryonic, which has the moral question there, and then then I've heard that there's some embryonic there's some embryonic stem cell research that's
adult stem cell.
Adult
stem cell, I think, is what you're looking at. It's
Okay.
been very successful.
Yeah,
very successful. Mm-hmm. And your listeners may say, well, what is embryonic stem cell? What's the big deal? Why is this? Well, let me kind of first explain a little bit of the history, but also what embryonic stem cell research is. And so basically embryonic stem cells are derived from eggs fertilized such as like at an in vitro fertilization clinic, usually. And then they're donated for research purposes. A lot of these embryos that are frozen in these clinics, a lot of them aren't used, and so some of them have to be discarded, and so a lot of them are discarded, and they're not discarded necessarily, but they're donated to universities or research facilities and so forth and so on. And just so everyone knows, this is legal. It's not illegal to do research on embryonic stem cells, but the pro-life community definitely, we don't want our taxpayer dollars going to destroy what is literally conceived human life. And so people, again, what is an embryonic stem cell? Basically, this is the process of an embryonic stem cell. You take an embryo, that's a fertilized human being. It's a fertilized egg. And so it's a human being at the earliest stages of life, or what we would call conception.
Got its unique DNA.
And so,
unique DNA.
Correct. Unique DNA, and if it is implanted into a woman's womb and attaches to the uterine wall, it will continue to grow into a human being, like you and I, Paul.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the process is this. They take DNA from an adult cell, and they inject it into the fertilized human egg, the embryonic stem cell. And then they move on. The egg begins dividing. It forms a mass of cells, and after 5 days or so, it forms a blastocyte. And yes, I'm not doing this from memory. I'm reading it. But which is a hollow embryonic ball of cells. And then stem cells are harvested, and that embryo is eventually destroyed. So there you got it. A human being who was conceived and now is discarded and destroyed, used for scientific, quote-unquote, purposes, except the purposes have all failed at this point, dating back to the beginning of embryonic stem cell research, at least in the United States. And I say, at least in the United States, I don't know of any medical breakthroughs, and the people I talk to, and the biggest expert we coordinate with on this is probably the Charlotte Lozier Institute, and that's pretty much Susan B. Anthony, from what I understand. And, of course, another group is Americans United for Life. But a little bit of the history behind how this happened. So embryonic stem cell research funding was allowed under President Clinton. George Bush, quickly into his term, around August 2001, banned federal funding on any embryonic stem cells after that date, basically. And so you couldn't use embryonic stem cells. You couldn't use taxpayer dollars. Then Obama, shortly into his term, reversed that ban under George W. Bush. The Supreme Court of the United States denied a challenge to Obama's executive order. And so here we sit today. Our United States government is funding embryonic stem cell research, which is essentially destroying conceived human life.
You know, it's really fascinating because I, as you're talking about all this, I can't help but think about where they're getting the supply. So going back to the beginning, and listen, I know there's been many couples that have used, IFV to conceive a child, and they're very, very grateful that it worked, and they had trouble conceiving the child of their own. I get that. And so, but if it's producing multiple human beings that are then frozen in space-time, not to be too science fiction, but I mean, that's really hard for me to get my head wrapped around. I'm going to be honest about it. That's causing a lot more questions than I have answers for right now. You know what I mean?
Well, I think if I understand where you're going, this dawned on me probably 4 or 5 years. I've been a family counselor 6 years now, and about a year or two into my employment, I found out that birth control can act as an abortifacient at times. And here, my wife, for a short period of time, many years ago, was on birth control when we were married. I also learned that IVF basically consists of producing lots of conceived human beings or fertilized eggs, and basically taking some of them and implanting them into and here we are, we're creating human life, and then we're discarding a lot of it. It's convicting to me. My wife and I, fortunately, have never participated in IVF, but I've got a family member that did, and lots of close friends, and I think it's a matter of education. A lot of folks just don't know, or they don't think about the implications. And so if I may just quickly summarize the reasons embryonic stem cell research, and IVF for that matter, are wrong, at least from a moral perspective, but also from a conservative, general political perspective. We've already discussed the morality and pro-life stance that we're creating human life and then we're destroying it. And some of that happens naturally on its own. But here we are, we're using U.S. taxpayer money to create human life, to hopefully find some medical breakthrough. And so that leads to a cheapening of human life. We're treating it as a commodity. And not only that, it's been an entire waste of probably $2 to maybe $4 billion total. And that's just U.S. taxpayer money. There's probably been other private grants and private money and so forth and so on poured into this. It's so odd when adult stem cell has been a light year or four in front of embryonic stem cell when it comes to results.
Yeah,
so,
I'm the adult. That's what's crazy is that with the adult stem cell research being so successful, I don't know if you saw there's a Joe Rogan podcast with Mel Gibson and his dad, and they were interviewing these doctors that were doing some stem cell stuff. I believe it's adult stem cells. I don't believe it was embryonic down in Panama, and they were doing stuff that hasn't been approved here for some reason. And I mean, the results are just insanely amazing. You know, he had his 90-year-old dad was in a wheelchair and is now walking, or at least was back when they did the interview a year or so ago. Those the adult stem cells much more promising than the embryonic.
And just the other day, 3 scientists in Japan were able to get adult stem cells to act like embryonic stem cells. So I think the U.S., just as a matter of practicality, beside the morality, even though I think that's important, the people we're dealing with in the U.S. government, hey, let's just divert our funds to what we know is a sure bet, what we know is we're going to get good results from. And so I hope all your listeners will look into this, contact their senators and congressmen, and I'm going to be contacting the Trump administration and National Institute of Health, Department of Health and Human Services, trying to get some answers and see if we can move the administration to block this funding.
Luke, you certainly have made me think this morning about a whole lot of stuff, and I'm sure a lot of other people out there feel the same way. From familycouncil.org, Luke McCoy, Merry Christmas, sir. Have a great one, and we'll do it again soon.
You too, Paul. To all your audience, Merry Christmas and Happy 2020.
All righty. Yeah, that's right. Well, eventually we're going to be able to say, we'll see you next decade. Folks, there are big changes coming to Conduit News. You know this.